Hi class. So today my article was called An Empirical Examination of the Relationship Between Adult Attention Deficit, Cooperative Conflict Management, and Efficacy for Working in Teams. It goes into detail about the overall losses in effect for organizations which employ adults with attention deficit, but does not talk about the possible gains caused by positive effects of adult attention deficit. I think that this is something which should be addressed in future research. In this article, 628 business students were the subject of this study, all working in teams together. They were teams of 4 and 5, I believe. Each student needed to gather information as part of a group project for a class. The audience for this article and the stakeholders, as far as I can tell, are organizations that employ adults with attention deficits. This research may generalize to most organizations, as many large companies will have at least one employee with attention deficits. These are defined as, quote, a persistent pattern of inattention and/or hyperactivity, impulsivity that is more frequent and severe than is typically observed in individuals at a comparable level of development. The principal stakeholders, then, are the managers who are working with adults with attention deficits. Some of the practical limitations of the study include using only business students and only those in the US and Canada. This may show some biases toward Western culture, but also bias toward younger audiences because of the choice to use students. There may be some cultural differences between those of student ages and those who are currently working in organizations affected by adults with attention deficit. There may also be some cultural biases in how attention deficits are diagnosed and treated in other cultures, and since we now work in a global environment, it would be prudent to take many other prominent cultures into consideration when dealing with teamwork for those attention deficits. The methods for this study are also a bit of a snag since they relied on self-reporting, which in itself can be problematic. People tend to say what they think the researcher wants to hear, whether that's the truth or not, so it can skew the outcomes of the research. One measure which was used, however, the CARE method, relied on students asking for accommodations related to their ADHD with their disability liaison on campus. I really like that idea because I think that was a good reliability measure, and this seems to be a better scale from which to work, as students who are seeking special accommodations have likely received a diagnosis from a mental health professional rather than simply self-reporting on a Likert scale. I appreciated that both methods were used for this research. I think the biggest difficulty in this article is parsing out exactly how adults with attention deficits both hamper productivity in some areas and are assets in other areas. During the study, for instance, those with attention deficits had difficulty concentrating on important but meaningless tasks. Does this mean that those with attention deficits should only be assigned to certain tasks within the organization with which they might excel? And that's a really difficult question to answer. I think that there is definitely a lot of room for improvement in the research here. So let me know what you think.